Hello, my name's Scott Conway. I'm with 4P360.com talking about 4P360 leadership. 4P360 is a leadership system, it's a leadership toolbox, and it's a leadership philosophy all rolled into one. Now the highest levels of leadership depend more on behavior than they do on skills. As you get to the highest and highest levels of leadership, I mean, there's only so much you can do as far as a skill set goes, but a lot of it is leading people, working with people, and dealing with the human element of doing business, the human element of engaging in any sort of organizational behavior, organizational activity. Executive temper tantrums. Now, a lot of times we say things like, well, yeah, I'm surprised someone at this level would do such a thing. And one of the things to reflect on is, think about history. If you reflect on heads of state in history, is there anything in history that would tell us that at a certain level of leadership, at a certain level of authority, human foibles stop bothering us? There is nothing. There is a long human history that the more power you get, the more human you still are. So executive temper tantrums, this was happening in a Southern California company. There was an executive literally pitching fits. And in the process of having his temper tantrums, he literally created the biggest global competitor for the company that he worked at. You see, this executive would get angry. He would yell, he would scream, he would cuss people out, he would throw things. The particular story going around is that he had taken someone's BlackBerry and he threw it at the person, bounced it right off of his chest. Now you would like to think that an executive, leading executives, wouldn't behave this way, but he did. Now why did the company keep him? Well, because as far as his seniors knew, he got the job done. When he would yell at people, they would get the job done. When he would cuss people out, they would get the job done. When he would throw things at people, they were afraid of him and they would get the job done. On the downside, though, people kept looking for other jobs, kept looking for ways to leave this leader. And one of the men who worked for this particular leader had a very special talent. He was one of the highest caliber people you can imagine having at the company. The head of his own division, getting his job done, getting business taken care of. And he didn't like being yelled at. He didn't like being cussed out. Certainly didn't want to have anything thrown at him. And so he was keeping an eye out for opportunity. One of the opportunities that came up was the opportunity to do a startup company with a small team of highly competent individuals. And he stepped out to work with this team. And this team built a brand new company, which a year later became the #1 global competitor in 22 countries, going head-to-head with the former employer. Now to think about this, had this former employer had a higher caliber executive, had this former employer had someone who could lead with more powerful, practical, principled, and positive leadership styles, they could have kept this guy. Instead of him ultimately going on to be the #2 man and the #1 global competitor, he could have been in their company, helped them build their brand, and helped them build their business globally. But because of one man's leadership, because of one man's negative leadership, because of the temper tantrums he threw, yelling and screaming and throwing things and cussing people out, they lost someone who was so talented that he could head up the international division at what became their top global competitor. An owner-manager fight, destroying a 3-generation business. This one's privately held. This was a business established by his father that he had been running for most of a generation, that his sons were taking over. He was still the owner on paper, and he had a fight with one of the managers. Now, the part that was particularly disappointing with this person is that he had been learning from me, but hadn't been paying attention to the lessons. He was one of those clients that would hear stuff, say, oh, that's good stuff, and then do nothing with it. And I wasn't the first coach he did this with. He wanted me to fix his people, but he didn't want to fix himself. Well, in the process, he ended up picking a fight. with his manager. He picked a fight with the person who knew the most about the business, the person who ran everything. And he picked this fight so bad, they got into it. It turned into litigation. He legitimately owed this woman $30,000. I had evaluated the situation for him. He could have gotten out of the whole problem for $30,000. He refused to pay her a dime for no other reason. He was just mad at her. And for him, what was right didn't matter. All he wanted was his way. And he kept the fight going. It turned into litigation. I had tried to negotiate with the other attorney, letting the other attorney know that you're only going to win $30,000. How about we settle for $30,000? And the other person said, no, we're going after everything. Well, this fight dragged on for over a year. This guy ended up paying over $50,000 of attorney fees. The other side fought tooth and nail to the bitter end. At the end, they won $30,000. But this problem killed the company. Not just from the cost, but from all the energetic draw-off it was. From the toxic culture it created, as everyone now knew that this person is in litigation with one of their top former employees, and you know it, so it doesn't matter if I'm one of the top employees, I could be the next one in that fight. And it destroyed the culture of his company. And in the process of destroying the culture of his company, it destroyed the company itself. A three-generation company started by his father, owned and operated by him, being handed off to his sons, and he killed it in a year with bad leadership. But not all the stories are bad stories. Sometimes you can have bad leadership and still end up with a good story. So there was an executive. They thought he might be CEO material, and so they were going to get him some extra training, try to fix up a few behavioral glitches. And you know, the coach in this case, working very, very high end, and he does a pay for performance, and so if he doesn't get the result, then he's not going to charge. And so that's the way this particular coach works. And one of the things that he has as one of his rules is you have to have 360-degree feedback. I need to be able to get confidential feedback from the people that supervise you, from your peers and from your subordinates, and ideally also from home, so I can get an idea what we're looking at, and this is going to be the way we're going to measure it. Because then I'm going to get 360-degree feedback from the exact same people later on, and we're going to see how well you're doing. And the person didn't want to do the 360-degree feedback. One of the other rules is that if you've been wronging people, one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to apologize to them. And the person says, well, I'm not going to apologize to anybody. And this went back and forth for a while, and ultimately, they made this coach offer after offer, and he said, no, I'm not going to work with him. You know, no judgment, no anything, just these are the terms I use to work with people. He doesn't want to do it, that's okay, he doesn't have to. I just won't work with him. I'm sure someone else will. Well, the president of the company found, well, what is exactly that this person won't do? Well, you know, he should be doing these things anyway. And so they fired the guy. Right after they fired this top executive, who's the executive VP of his division, two of their top performing employees that were right under him, his direct reports, came to the president of the company and said, thank you for firing him. Had you not fired him, we would have quit. And they would have lost two of their top performers by keeping a negative leader. Now think about this for a second. If they lost these two people, that would have been a major hit to the company. And because they got rid of a bad leader who refused to become a positive leader, they were able to hang on to these two people, and the company was able to go forward with two of their top performers. So this is one of those cases where they didn't destroy the company. They didn't create their largest global competitor. They were able to move things forward. Great leadership is critical to high-level success. This human element, this human dynamic, dealing person to person. Peter Drucker says that we were moving into a knowledge worker age. The simple definition of a knowledge worker is someone who knows more about their job than their supervisor knows about their job. Where I might be the manager, but I don't know how to do that person's job as well as that person knows how to do their job. I might not be the best forensic accountant. I might not be the best research attorney. I might be managing real estate agents that are better at selling real estate than I am. I might be managing scientists that are better at doing their research than I could possibly step in and do it. That my expertise could be in managing people and leading people, not in doing the work itself. And that's the crux of the knowledge worker age. And then as we've been learning and be getting more sophisticated in our leadership, we begin to realize, okay, you can manage systems, you can manage things, but you don't really manage people. You need to lead people. Now here's part of why this is so critical. John Maxwell says people don't leave their jobs, people leave their leaders. Sean Oliver, who's a business consultant and coach, told me that surveys find that 78% of the time someone leaves a job. 78%. It's not because of the job, it's because of the leadership. So think about that for a second. If surveys find that 78% of the time someone leaves a job, it's because of the leadership, not because of the job. That means if you can have good, powerful, practical, principled, and positive leadership, you could eliminate 78% of the time great team members are leaving your company looking for other jobs. In fact, if someone is happy with a job, if they like the people, they like the leadership, they like the culture, they feel honored, they feel respected, they feel like they know how to win, they will stay at a job that even pays less and maybe has less in the way of benefits because it's a pleasant experience for them. But if they feel it's toxic, if they dread going to work, if it's just killing them a little bit every day to be someplace, they start looking for someplace else to work, even if it means a pay cut. If they can afford to take the hit to the pay, they will be looking somewhere else, and they will take the hit to the pay to find a place that when they wake up in the morning to go to work there, it's going to be a pleasant experience and a better day rather than a worse day. Amy Sanderson, who's a leadership trainer, she says employees cannot flourish under poor leadership. And when they are faced with having to follow poor leaders, companies risk losing the very best and most talented people. So, if all this is true, why do people use these negative leadership systems, these negative leadership techniques? Well, part of it is very often we don't train them for leadership. They don't have a clear model. They don't have a clear way to evaluate their techniques. They don't have a system for leading people. And when they do have some experience in making sure things get done, they're so accustomed to the kind of leadership that might work with people who have no options, people who have no choice, people who need to be pushed and prodded and pulled and cajoled and yelled at and screamed at to make them do their job because they have nowhere else to go. And you have to push them because they're low-quality people. Well, that might work with some of these low-quality people. No, they'll never find another job. But what about high-quality people? What about people who have options? What about good leaders, good executives, good scientists, good real estate agents, good anything? If you lead them in a negative way, if you lead them in a way that is poor, you lead them in a way that is toxic to them, you lead them in a way that gives them anxiety, gives them fear, gives them frustration, leaves them confused, the quality people will leave. So what you end up doing is you end up keeping the worst people because they're the ones who have the fewest options, and you lose the best people. So obviously you want to have some method of leadership, some actual system of leadership. So here's a leadership myth. You hear this sometimes. When you have a room full of leaders, they all fight for power and nothing gets done. Now I've heard this said time and time again. And for almost a quarter century I have taken exception with this. What I have always taught is if you have a room full of leaders and they fight for power, you don't have a room of leaders. You might have a room of commanders. You might have a room of bosses. You might have a room of pushy people, but you don't have leaders. Because leadership is about getting things done. Leadership is about moving things forward. And if there's a power struggle, that means you don't have leaders. You have people who are seeking power. And someone who seeks power, someone who loves power, isn't necessarily a leader. So the leadership truth is if you had a room full of 4P360 leaders, more would get done than you might dare to dream. If you have a room full of 4P360 leaders, the 4 pillars, 360-degree leadership, stuff gets done. If you have a room full of leaders who are fighting for power, you don't have a room of leaders. Leadership is influence. John Maxwell says this time and time again. In all of his books, he reminds us leadership is influence. Well, the Conway corollary to this is influence is leadership. So if leadership is influence, and influence is leadership when your presence makes a difference somewhere. Where you showing up makes things be different than they would be if you weren't there. When you taking some action makes something different than it would be if you weren't there, you are leading. And 4P360 is a system of leadership that allows you to do this on purpose. So 4P360 is a uniquely self-consistent leadership system. 4P360 is uniquely self-consistent in that the way you lead down is the same way you lead across, is the same way you lead up, is the same way you lead in any direction, including yourself. The rules are consistent. The technique is consistent. The pillars are the same, no matter the direction of your leadership and even when you're being led. It's a comprehensive leadership toolbox. So when you're dealing with the 4P360 leadership system, not only is it uniquely self-consistent, that the rules are the same no matter what direction you're going because it works on principles. That it is a comprehensive leadership toolbox and that any tool you have, any tool you have can be filtered through, adjusted and changed using the 4-pillar system. And as you apply it, you can use the 360 system with the 00 feature to evaluate any leadership tool that you might learn and adjust it so you can put it in your 4P360 toolbox. Although there is a substantial toolbox included in the 4P360 system of specific techniques and tools that work on principles and are easily adapted. 4P360 is also a leadership philosophy. So even if you're facing a totally unique situation, even if you're facing a situation that is so unique that you're going to have to be completely creative and come up with something brand new in order to deal with whatever unique situation you might run into, that it gives you a philosophical framework to evaluate whatever ideas you have. So that you have each one of the 4 pillars to work from. You have the 360 degrees and the 00 feature to work with to evaluate whatever ideas you have, whatever ideas your team might brainstorm, whatever teams your mastermind might come up with. It's a leadership philosophy to evaluate any idea. It's a leadership philosophy to adapt any tool. It's a leadership technique that will allow you to use anything you learn from anywhere and make it a technique that you can use, no matter what technique you might ever see. So 4P360 is my proprietary information, it's my proprietary system, and so, as part of my fervent request to you is just, understand that this is mine. And that you do not, of course, have permission to go teach it somewhere else, but by all means, use it yourself. So my name is Scott Conway, Scott with 1 T, S-C-O-T, last name is Conway. And the 4P360 leadership system is my proprietary method to teach you how to lead the people that are following you, how to lead the people that aren't following you, and how to lead the people that you're following. How to lead in more directions than you might think. We have bonus direction there. Traditional 360-degree leadership means lead down, across, and up. We're going to talk about more directions than that, and we're going to talk about a 00 feature, and what 01 is and what 02 is. But you can see how critically important all of this is. That poor leadership, negative leadership, toxic leadership can create the #1 global competitor and has done that for one company. that poor leadership, negative leadership, can destroy a 3-generation business, and did. Getting rid of negative leadership and installing better leadership saved the company from losing 2 of its top people. When you do this well, the very best people want to work with you. The very best people want you on their team. And the very best people want to be on your team. 4P 360, 4-pillar, 360-degree leadership, which is even bigger than you might think. And this is just an introduction as to why it is so critically important. My name is Scott Conway. Thank you very much.